So that's a good signal to us in the United States to say we need to be speaking up. We need to be the citizens. We shouldn't be relying on our own military. I mean, they're not supposed to get involved in all these. They're supposed to salute. Once the decision made, off they go. But there are some people within that military that are willing to risk their careers, willing to go to prison to speak out. Let me just finish this with one last thing on our military. And as Brian mentioned, I've been doing a lot of research, a lot of work, a lot of advocacy, a lot of counseling on the issue of sexual assault and rape in our military. The statistics are horrible. 1 in 3 women in the military are sexually assaulted, raped while they're in the military. 1 in 3. And so I was giving this statistic to a group in California last week, and the question was, well, if 1 in 3 women are being raped, how many guys in the military are doing that? That must indicate that a lot of guys are doing stuff. And it does. It does. 1 in 3. It should be put on every recruiting door. I mean, if there is a predatory organization, you ought to at least announce it. If it's government predatory organization, it ought to go on that recruiting door. In fact, that's something, if anybody does truth in recruiting here in the Charlotte area, I would encourage you to have bumper stickers made up, those things that you have to scrape off, that you just can't peel off. Put those things up on those doors. The Deputy Chief of Staff for the Army, Deputy Chief of Staff for Personnel for the Army, 6 weeks ago in a congressional hearing finally acknowledged that there is rape of men going on in the military. He said that of the reported rapes in the Army last year, 10% of them are reported by men. All of these figures probably are low. It's a horrible situation that's going on in there. The other aspect of it is the next stage of violence, of taking another person's life, a person's life that's in your own organization. I just came from Fayetteville, North Carolina, right up the road here. John Hewer, one of our Veterans for Peace people, had been organizing my trip around here. He and I were up there with 40 other people who were out at the front gate of Fort Bragg yesterday, as we had a vigil there to acknowledge that in the last 9 months in your state of North Carolina, 4 military women have been murdered. 4 military women murdered by military men in only the state of North Carolina. Last Friday, I was in Wichita Falls, Texas, Shepherd Air Force Base. I was with the mother of Blanca Luna, a young Air Force woman, who was murdered in March of 2008, stabbed in the back of the neck, just like one of the women right here in Fayetteville, stabbed in the back of the neck just last week. Last week. The 4th one here in North Carolina was killed last week in Fayetteville, killed by military men. We don't know yet who killed Blanca Luna. Here it is, 7 months after her death. The Air Force has not given the family an autopsy report. The military says it's interviewing hundreds of people, taking DNA samples. Still don't know what happened. She was murdered in her barracks, the Shepherd Inn on base. She was within 3 days of graduating from a technical course she was going to. The murders of military women, sometimes covered up, in my opinion, by their being called suicides. You know, in Iraq, 100 military women have been killed. It's an even 100 right now, U.S. military. 14 civilian women have been killed there, U.S. civilian women. Of the 100 military women killed, 42 have been killed in what they call non-combat incidents. They weren't killed by an IED explosion. They weren't killed by a mortar coming in. They weren't killed by a sniper. They were killed in a non-combat incident. And when you go through these incidents, 20 of them, any one of us, as we would read the available information, would go, I think there's a little something fishy in that. Of those 20, 13 of them have been now classified as suicides, which is an extraordinarily high rate of people who have been killed in non-combat situations being killed in, or killing themselves, and especially the age grouping of them. 5 are of the age of 32 to 47. Women who are 32 to 47 who've been in the military and all of a sudden they kill themselves. Let's see, 5 of them are African American. 4 of them spoke up in their units, and they signaled to other people that there's something going on in our unit. There's contracting fraud going on. There's people that are on the take. 2 of the women had been sexually assaulted within the recent time of their death, or previous to their death. One woman, Tina Priest, 20 years old. She had been sexually assaulted 10 days before she was found dead in her barracks. 2 years after her death, her family finally started getting the documents from the investigation. And as they started looking at them, they were a little perturbed, and they just didn't fit, everything didn't fit. And they knew she wasn't suicidal. The mom had talked to her after she had been raped. She was mad, she was angry, she was upset, but she wasn't suicidal. Well, they took all this information to a forensic specialist, and he did kind of like measurements of what would the angle she would have to have that M16 in order to pull it, for the bullet to go through here and all of this. And he came to the conclusion that it was physically impossible for her to have held that weapon at that angle for the bullet to come out. The military says, no, this is suicide, and the mom said, no, it's not suicide, she couldn't have done it. The Army re-looked at it and then finally said, well, she must have committed suicide by pulling the trigger with her toe. Yeah. There are a lot of strange things that are going on right now, and it breaks my heart that the military that I was a part of, is being used in wars that I don't believe it ought to be in to start with, and then the treatment of the people that are in it. The murders of women in our military, the rapes of women and men in our military, the treatment of them for post-traumatic stress disorder, that every one of them that are coming back, they have had some horrendous things that have happened. I mean, we've had 1.5 million of our military that have been in Iraq and Afghanistan in the last 7.5 years. We have 140,000 in Iraq right now, military, 180,000 civilians that are there. We have more civilians in Iraq than we have military. What's happening with those civilians? They're undergoing the same sort of thing. They're having trucks blown up by these IEDs because they're the truck drivers. They're in the 14 permanent bases, cooking, doing this, that, and the other thing. They're there when those mortars come in every single day. They get scared. They go home with trauma too. What do we do with those? Are the contractors paying for counseling for them? No, not at all. So we have a real social issue on our hand of all of these people that are returning from these wars, that will be in our society, that will be in our neighborhoods, that are our friends. They may go to your church. They go to the colleges here. You know, some of the colleges are now having to have special programs because these men and women with PTSD can't cope sometimes in regular classroom environments. There are too many people there. The door slams. Somebody goes under the table. They're angry. They can't learn as fast, but they want to get an education. That's why they join the Army generally. We want to get that college degree. So right here in North Carolina, in fact, North Carolina State University has a special program for veterans where allowances are made for them for these difficult learning environments. They have to do all the work, but sometimes they're given a little more time for it. In fact, 2 of the students from North Carolina State University were up in Washington 2 weeks ago on a panel that I was a part of, Veterans Issues, and it was sponsored by the Black Congressional Caucus.